correct. But it's a pleasure and honor to have each and every one of you here this evening for our 12th Town Hall meeting. One of the commitments that I made while I was campaigning is that each and every month we would come back and have a Town Hall meeting in Broward County and also in Palm Beach County, because I think it's very important that I continue to have an open line of communication with the constituents so that they can hear our assessments and know exactly what is going on in Washington, D.C. Two district offices. The closest district office located in Palm Beach County is up in West Palm Beach at the intersection of Belvedere and Federal Highway. If you go just south of there, you'll see our district headquarters right next to Rich's Ice Cream. I think that's a great place for it to be for myself. The next location is down in Broward County. That's the Fort Lauderdale office. It's at the intersection of I-95 and Cypress Creek. If you go west on Cypress Creek, take that first right on Andrews Avenue, you'll see the Giant Bank building. It's on the first floor there. Our staff is there to serve you, just the same as that's the reason why I exist. And the great thing right now, this being a 6-month point, we brought the entire staff, the DC staff and all our district staff together because we want to go and look at our lessons learned and our best practices. So we're having a staff retreat today and then for tomorrow. Okay, here we are with the calendar. As you can see, we're right here in this recess week of the 6th of June. And of course, hopefully a lot of you remember what the 6th of June represents for the United States of America. It's the day of the greatest military invasion, the greatest military expedition known to man, the invasion of Normandy, also known as D-Day. We stand here today because of the great men who hit those beaches in Omaha and Utah and climbed those heights of Point du Hoc. So never forget those men as they are dying to leave. We're back in session for the next 2 weeks. Head back up to D.C. on Monday. And then you see the last week we are also back out of session, but that's when I'll be heading over to Afghanistan. I have not been over to Afghanistan since November 2007. A lot of things have changed since I sit on the Armed Services Committee. I feel it's time for me to get back over there and get a good assessment with a lot of things that's going on, and also to get an understanding of what our men and women are facing on the ground. And I'll be very happy to come back and report to you on that as well. As I said, the two committees that I sit on, the Armed Services Committee, two subcommittees, military personnel, and then also emerging threats and capabilities. Emerging threats and capabilities, that's the subcommittee that oversees our special operations forces and also contends with nuclear, biological, chemical type of threats, and also cyber threats. And if you've been paying attention to the news, we do have a problem with cybersecurity. We've been attacked by China, very much so recently. They do have an organization stood up. They've had cyber attacks against us. And the United States military has started a new command called CyberCom to make sure that we can protect our information systems, not just in the military, but also trying to work with the private sector as well. The other one, a great honor to be on the Small Business Committee. Had a couple of great meetings. Yesterday talked to a small business forum at the FAU Research Technology Park over in Deerfield Beach. It's so important that we understand that if we're going to turn around the economic situation in the United States of America, we've got to set the conditions for these small businesses to grow. Because when you look at US Highway 1, all through this district, from Fort Lauderdale Airport up to Jupiter Inlet, you see too many closed storefronts. And if you think about maybe there were 6, 7, 8 Americans that worked in those storefronts, what that means to the local economy. That's what we have to do to turn it around. Okay, this is a review. I want to kind of give you a snapshot of the past 6 months. 25% of this first tour of duty at the United States House of Representatives is done now, and it's been an incredible whirlwind. 412 votes on the House floor. Co-sponsored 104 bills. We introduced 6 bills, and we even had one bill, our first piece of legislation that passed on the House floor, 393 to 0. And that was the one we found a wasted program in the Department. Continuing on with the review, 62 hearings, Armed Services Committee. And part of that, we completed the National Defense Authorization Act for 2012. That will now go over to the Appropriations Committee so we can appropriate funds to the Department of Defense to our men and women in our armed forces for fiscal year 2012. 18 hearings in the Small Business Committee. Last week we had a real good committee hearing on the access of capital for our small businesses. We have got to make sure that it's not the large banks, but it's our small banks. We have to make sure that we reduce the regulatory burden on them so that these small community banks can support our small businesses and getting them back opened up and strong. 230 total meetings on Capitol Hill, 135 events in Washington, D.C. Now we're up to 12 town hall meetings. As I said, we will continue to do that every month. 92 meetings here in the district. The thing that we are most proud of as a staff, the response, 17,500 letters back to our constituents. That is a very important thing. That's my commitment to you, that we will not break that line of communication. Are we perfect? No. So understand there may be some times where there's a little bit of gap. But we're always going to be working to make sure we keep that open line of communication to each and every one of you. And I'm pretty familiar to the people with TSA in Terminal 3, U.S. Air, with these 14 round trips that I've done in these few months. Naval Air Station Guantanamo Bay, that was a good visit because it was so important to get a on-the-ground understanding and estimate of what's happening down there. And we have to get these non-state, non-uniform belligerents off the battlefield. That's just the bottom line. The recidivism rate, we right now have some concerns about some of the people that we are quote-unquote aiding in Libya. Some of those guys that we have released previously from Guantanamo Bay who have had operations against our men and women in Iraq, and now they're in Libya. So we've got to be very careful about releasing people back into the battlefield. Been up there to talk to the governor and get his assessment and understand his way ahead and his direction he wants to take the state of Florida, as well as the Lieutenant Governor, the Attorney General, and also the Agricultural Commissioner. One of the great things 2 days ago, Tyco International, ADT, just moved their headquarters into a new building up in Yamato. And if you're paying attention to the news, we are going to have a new headquarters relocated to Boca Raton. I think it's Guarda, which is a Canadian security organization. So what we're doing is we're working very hard to bring jobs and opportunities to the people here in South Florida. We need to make sure that we have the best possible venue. We set the conditions for the right type of economic policies that want people to come and move here. And the company is leaving California. Okay, major legislation. As I talked about, we have the National Defense Authorization Act, which is where the Armed Services Committee goes through all of the amendments to make sure that we are authorizing the appropriations of the military. That was a very long, drawn-out process. It started out on a Wednesday morning at 10 o'clock. We finished on a Thursday morning at 3 in the morning. But it was well worth it for, I think, close to about 200 amendments to make sure they got through to continue to fund our military. Part of that, 3 amendments that we had that will save the American taxpayer dollars in the fiscal year 2012, $80 million over the course of 10 years, $800 million. And the point is this: we need to have every single member in the House of Representatives in the committees by which they have oversight to look for those wasteful programs so that we can turn this thing around as far as our debt and deficit and alleviate the burden we have on the American people. The Patriot Act, S-990, it did pass. Those 3 provisions, I voted against it. The main reason is this: there are 3 provisions. It's the records provision, it's the roving wiretap, and then the lone wolf provision. I sent a letter over to the director of the FBI, Director Robert Mueller. I did not get a response back. And it was very simple. I wanted to know how many times have we used those provisions, and how many times did it bear fruit? I can tell you that the lone wolf provision had never been used. The concern that I had about the records provision was that the language did not say probable cause, it said relevance. And that just didn't sell very well with me. And then no one could explain how many times we used the roving wiretap. And when I look at the fact that people like Major Nadal Hassan, Carlos Bledsoe, who left Memphis, Tennessee, went over to Somalia, then went to Yemen, came back and shot two U.S. Army soldiers at a Little Rock recruiting station. We've got to make sure that we are tailoring these type of programs to go after the enemy. And one of the things I wanted to see was this taken out of the criminal division of the FBI and brought it to the counterterrorism division. I I was not very comfortable with having these Patriot Act provisions extended for 4 years. I would have rather seen it done for another 6 months or 1 year, so we'll see what happens as we go forward, but I voted against that. The last thing, we have the Homeland Security appropriations so that we can make sure that our law enforcement officers and our firemen and our courts, they have all the right type of funding to make sure that we have a secure home. A week ago Friday, as you know, we have a combat operation going on in Libya. One of the concerns is that that combat operation is getting close to violating the War Powers Act of 1973, which states very simply, the President of the United States has the ability to conduct a limited scope combat operation. Supposedly the criteria is any attack against the territories, possessions of the United States of America, threats to our allies or to our homeland. After 60 days, the President, or within those 60 days, the President is supposed to come to the Congress and present his case for us to vote on continuance of that combat operation, because by Constitution we're the ones that can authorize a declaration of war. As of this time, the President has not come to us. He did give a speech, he did send a letter, but he has not come to us. The clock is ticking. I think right now we're about day 80. In 90 days, that combat operation has to cease by law. If y'all remember the Nixon administration, Nixon originally vetoed the War Powers Resolution Act, and then of course the Congress came back and overrode his veto. The thing is, we cannot have our executive branch, regardless who's sitting there at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, violating the separation of powers, the checks and balances that our founding fathers and our constitutional republic have put in place. Because the thing is, we have to be very careful, because the message we send is that the next thing you know, you wake up and you can have tomahawk cruise missiles or anything going on in any other country. And as you hear right now in the news, there's concern about an escalation of efforts in Yemen even right now. So we will see what happens when we go back. Speaker of the House, John Boehner, brought forth a resolution that did pass. I voted against it because all it was a basic statement of the obvious. And it said that the President would get another 14 days to submit a report. Well, we all know what the report is. Dennis Kucinich, I voted for Dennis Kucinich's resolution because Dennis Kucinich's resolution was in keeping with the War Powers Resolution Act. It said that the President, at the time of that amendment, that resolution had passed, he had 15 days to begin the cessation of operations in Libya. So anyone wants to talk about me not being bipartisan, me and Dennis Kucinich got together on something. The other thing that happened last week, the administration and also about 100 congressional Democrats said that we wanted to have a vote on a clean debt limit. So we did have a vote on a clean debt limit. As you can see, it failed 97 to 318. And just so you know, there are only 240 Republicans there. So you can see that was once again a bipartisan statement that said that we don't want to see just a straight, clean, raise of the debt limit. And you can look at any poll across the United States of America. The highest poll I've ever seen is 27% of Americans want to see the debt limit raised. You cannot raise the debt limit unless we put in place spending control measures that will make sure that we make ourselves in Washington, D.C. fiscally responsible. And I'll talk about some of those spending control measures later. Some of the legislation that I've co-sponsored here since the last month, you can see there, strengthen Medicare paying taxpayers, Death Tax Repeal Act. It's one of those taxes we don't need to see come back. It really does constrain the ability of people to pass on in generations the legacy of their estates or the businesses and things that they have built up. We don't want to have that. We tax you enough in life. I don't think we need to tax you as well in death. International Child Abduction and Prevention Act, one of the things we're seeing, as a matter of fact, we do have a father that is here in Congressional District 22 who had a Belgian mother come in and abduct his child, Gabby, and take her back over to the United Arab Emirates. And you are well aware of the situation with the father who had his son taken, I believe it was in Brazil. But we got to make sure we have the right type of procedures for some of these countries. We need to make sure that we have a law in place to protect it. Hiring Our Heroes Act of 2011. There are too many. There are too many homeless and jobless veterans here in South Florida, and we need to make sure that that does not happen. If you ever get a chance, go visit a great place called the Stand Down House, I think up in Lake Worth, Florida, run by Roy Foster. You know, when we have a female veteran that is living out of her car with 3 of her children, that's unacceptable. So we have to do this right type of things. And when you go across this district, you have businesses down here such as BRS Industries, which is the #1 producer of cargo parachutes for the United States military. They not have a single veteran working there. We've got to make sure that we start paying attention to the young veterans that we have coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan. Give them an opportunity to continue to serve our communities. Small Business Encouragement Act. This is a second piece of legislation right now. It's sitting in the Ways and Means Committee. Because the great thing about being on the Small Business Committee, small business touches just about everything. But we really don't have the oversight to pass legislation through our committee. So this is going to take the Work Opportunity Tax Credit and extend it for 2012 and 2013. If you're a small business owner, and in the previous year you had $20 million or less in revenue, you have 100 employees or less, what we're talking about here is a $6,000 tax credit for you hiring someone off the unemployment rolls. Then if you live in a county with double-digit unemployment, you get an additional $6,000. This is something where I think is very important that we can spur on the growth of our small businesses and get them back to the point where we can open up some of these storefronts and we can reduce this double-digit unemployment rate that we have here in our state as well as in our counties, Broward and Palm Beach. As you can see, it has bipartisan support. It's also supported by the National Federation of Independent Businesses and also the National Black Chamber of Commerce. And if you understand what's happening in our inner cities, we're talking about unemployment of 16%, not the national average of 9.1, 9.2%. So this is something that if you want to get on the phone, call Chairman Dave Camp and ask them to quickly get a vote on it and their Ways and Means Committee so we can get it to the House floor, we can get it voted on, and then we'll work hard to get it to the Senate and get the President to sign. H.R. 4. I think a lot of people here, small business owners, remember that very onerous regulation that said that small business owners were going to have to provide a 1099 for every purchase at or above $600. But the good thing is that you don't have that anymore. It was passed through the House, passed through the Senate, but we still have some things that the Senate has not taken action on. And I'll let you look over and review that. You know, as I go through and talk to a lot of the small business owners, there are 3 things that continue to be the recurring thing. The #1 thing is to develop confidence. Confidence in us, in the House of Representatives, and then also confidence from you all, the small business owners, corporate business executives, and also the consumers, the everyday citizens. We've got to restore confidence. The second thing I talked about earlier is capital. The access to capital, so that we can start once again expanding our small businesses. And part of that is also reducing the regulatory burden. That was one of the things that we talked about in that small business hearing where we had a couple of representatives from some small banks. With the FDIC coming down and really the burdens that they're putting on small banks is just starting to get a little bit too tough on them. The larger banks, of course, they can handle it. They can hire more people. They have a whole slew of lawyers and things of that nature. But the small businesses, the community banks that you see around here, it's really starting to hurt them. And the last thing is certainty. We have got to get some certainty out there as far as where we're going with our economic policy, where we're going with our tax policy, where we're going with our monetary policy. One of the things that's really concerning me is that this quantitative easing part 2 is going to end at the end of June. We have almost put ourselves in a situation where we have an artificial economy, where we've monetized our debt. We've printed a whole lot of money. And we've dropped interest rates so low that there are a lot of organizations, financial institutions, that have been kept afloat that maybe should not have been survived. So we'll see how this comes out in the future. Energy Tax Prevention Act, we can't have that. We can't stack up more tax burden on our businesses. And one of the things that happened up there recently was the administrator of the EPA was at a hearing, and she was asked very frankly, does the EPA consider the economic impact on businesses when they bring in these new regulations or they change regulations? And our answer is no. You can't have that. Once again, I think everyone has seen the problems at the gas pump. Before I came down here, I saw an Exxon station up in Washington, D.C., not too far from Kennedy Center. I think it was $5.49. We have seen a little bit of a dip in the gas prices, but the thing is, we don't need to get complacent. We have to start developing the full spectrum of our energy resources in the United States of America. The oil, the natural gas, the coal, it's a national security issue if we don't start our own energy resource program. It's an economic issue that can spur on this economy. It's an employment issue where we can get Americans hired back and get them working. So now's the time for us to do it. We can't sit back and wait any longer. As I said, in the past 6 months, you've seen gas, and this is regular, unleaded, from $3.03, it hit up to $3.79. Of course, that's the average across the nation. There are some places where it spikes a little bit higher than other places. Florida bankruptcy, it did go down somewhat. 1,000 in January to 967. Still, that's a bit too much. When you think about it, those represent Americans that aren't working now. And we still have double-digit unemployment down in the state of Florida. Unemployment there, 9.2 to 9.1, a little bit dip for Florida, 11.9 to 10.8. But still, the thing is, 1 out of every 10 Floridians is out of work. And when you think about the foreclosures down here, we've got a lot of problems that are exacerbated in South Florida, more so than the rest of this state. So we've got to rectify that. This is the problem. And we have to contend with this. We have to come up with solutions for this. We sat down last week with the President in the White House last week, Wednesday. The Thursday following, we had Secretary of the Treasury, Tim Geithner, come over and talk to the freshman class, and we still aren't getting a plan. We still don't have a direction. You know, Vice President Joe Biden is meeting with a group of individuals for negotiations about once or twice out of a week. We can't kick this can down the road. It is very evident the things that we have to do. China owns 30% of the debt in the United States of America, and the clock continues to click on. $46,000 is the amount that each and every American, man, woman, and child will have to write on a check for us to rectify this debt. This is something that we can't pass on to our subsequent generations. I am really concerned about what's happening across North Africa and the Middle East. Because I think that a lot of people talk about this Arab Spring and this great euphoria. But what I really see is a Muslim Brotherhood nightmare. I really see some forces at work that are causing the removal of people that aren't the greatest of guys. But at least they maintain some type of order. I'll give you a great example. Since you saw the deposing of Mubarak in Egypt, the first time in 40 years, Iranian warships transited through the Suez Canal. Rockets and mortars, the intensity of the attacks coming out of Gaza and the southern Israel was picked up. An Egyptian foreign minister traveled to Iran to meet with their foreign minister. A senior Egyptian military official traveled to Syria. The Coptic Christian community in Egypt is now under arms to try to protect their churches. The border crossing between Egypt and Gaza is now open. And there's open talk about the Camp David peace accords being null and void. And the reconciliation pact that was created between Fatah, the Palestinian Authority, and Hamas, who has in its charter the elimination, eradication, and destruction of the modern-day Jewish state of Israel, was brokered by Egyptians. I have big concerns about who really is behind these actions that are going on in North Africa and the Middle East. I don't want to see the United States military under some sense of euphoria being co-opted into that and being made complicit so that now we're contracting out our military for individuals that we really don't know. In the Armed Services hearing, when we had Secretary Gates and Admiral Mullen sit before us, we really could not define who these rebels are. So that's a big concern for me. Then the other thing is, we can't go to those 6 or 7 borders for Israel. Based upon that statement, you have already heard Mahmoud Abbas saying that if Israel does not come to the table to negotiate along those lines, that they will go to the United Nations this summer and seek a unilateral declaration of a Palestinian state. The concern that we must have is if they seek to bypass the United Nations Security Council, of which America is a permanent member, and with our vote we can nullify that. If they seek to bypass that, then we have concerns, because that's not a good thing for Israel. If you look at those borders, now you're talking about this modern-day state of Israel having a width of about 7 to 9 miles. And being a former artillery officer, I can tell you very simply what I could do. I could be on the other side of that border, and I could put rockets, artillery, and mortars on you, and you would not have a minute to react. Which is exactly what Prime Minister Netanyahu said when he spoke to our Congress. He said, in southern Israel, and I'm going to try to pronounce this word, I've never got it right, so forgive me. Instead, say it right? I was close? Okay. But in Cedron, they have shelters and playgrounds for the children. And when that siren goes off, they have 60 seconds before someone could lose their life. And Prime Minister Netanyahu said, no one in the United States of America would accept their children living like that. So why would we expect the people of Israel to have to live like that? As we talk about heading over to Afghanistan at the end of the month, one of the things we have to be concerned with is the relationship with Pakistan. China is already going to be selling modern fighter jets to Pakistan. It's the JF-17s. China is also in negotiations with Pakistan to build them a naval base. That's not what an ally does. So we have to be very circumspect in our relationship with Pakistan. All right, some of the problems that I see coming out of the White House. The president put forth a budget on Valentine's Day in February. That budget went over to the Senate and it was voted down, 0-97. Did not get one vote from the Senate. The speech that was given at George Washington University, that's not a budget. We have not seen any type of plan. 40% increase in food stamps. And you know what happened as far as the jobs report that came out last Friday. I don't think we're on the right road to recovery when half of the jobs that were produced were from McDonald's. Not saying anything wrong with McDonald's, but I will tell you this. When I was growing up as a young kid back in Atlanta, Georgia, when you went into a McDonald's or Burger King or Wendy's or whatever, you normally saw one adult. That was the supervisor. Most of the other people working there were high school kids. What do you see now when you go to McDonald's, the Burger King, the Wendy's, some of these other fast food restaurants? That's not how we create jobs in the United States of America. So we've got to turn that around. And we've got to make sure that the right type of private sector jobs is happening in our country. Now, these are the conditions that I talked about when we mentioned raising the debt limit. And it was so funny. I mean, I had a little interview with WPTV, NBC News Channel today. And, I think it's Michael Williams. He said, don't you think you should be voting for the debt limit and not play games with the possible default? The important thing is this. We've got to start looking out. We've got to have viable solutions for the future. If we just raise the debt limit without any type of spending control measure, without any type of plan, all we're doing is setting ourselves up for a future catastrophe. So that's why I came up with these 4 conditions. Number 1, if there is ever a time for the federal government to have a constitutionally mandated balanced budget amendment, now is the time to do that. No one can and even in the state of Florida, you know, the funny thing, you know, when I saw Bill Hager this morning, you know, he kind of rubbed my face in it. He said, hey, you know, Congressman, you know, we balanced our budget here in Florida. And I said, okay, Bill, thanks a lot. But it's important that we do that. The second thing is this. Historically, we've got to bring revenues and spending back closer together. 18 to 20%, that's where you've always seen revenues. We've got to cap federal government spending as per the GDP at 20%. Federal government spending right now is 25% of our GDP. And if we're not careful, we're talking about going out to 32% of our GDP. It's just a matter of time. Our debt right now is 66% of our GDP. And history will show you when you get to 80 to 85%, you're redlining. I can't come before you and lie to you. I cannot come before you, and I will not come before you and not present viable solutions for us to correct this fiscal situation, this morass in which we find ourselves. The third thing is this. The corporate business tax rate in the United States of America is the second highest in the world, second only to Japan. Businesses are sitting on capital that they want to bring back here to the United States of America and hire people. If we just take that and cut it from 35% down to 20 to 22%, therefore the maximum that any corporation or business will be paying across the United States of America, when you add in the state corporate business tax rates, about 24 to 26%. Get rid of subsidies, get rid of loopholes, just put it at that 20 to 22% rate and allow free market, free enterprise to grow businesses here in the United States of America. We've got to get back to producing and manufacturing and hiring Americans in America, because if not, we're not going to do it. The last thing is this. We need to put in place a trigger control mechanism so that if the debt limit is here, when you reach a certain percentage of that debt limit, automatic spending cuts kick in. This is the 74th time we talked about raising the debt limit. It's really more of a debt recommendation. If we don't get serious about those simple type of control measures, if we want to increase the debt limit by $2 trillion, then the federal government, we need to find spending cuts for $2 trillion so we can offset. And that's what we have to do the hard work of doing. And that's what we're going to do. You know, everyone's talking about, you know, come the 2nd of August, you know, bad things are going to happen. Why do you think they picked the 2nd of August? That's the day before Congress goes on recess. Okay. We have got to look at reforming our mandatory spending programs. And I will tell everyone that's out there that may want to yell or whatever, the President of the United States last week Wednesday said entitlement reform has to be looked at, and we met that. 60% of the budget pie in the United States of America are the mandatory spending programs. Our interest payments, our Medicare, our Medicaid, our Social Security. The other 40% is discretionary spending. Non-defense discretionary, and then 20% defense discretionary. You can X out the entire defense budget for the United States of America. You're still going to have $1 trillion plus deficit. That's where we are. But understand, what is the number one responsibility for the federal government? To keep you safe and protect you. So we have got to start looking at viable solutions. We've got to stand behind Israel. That's just a no-brainer. Because if we don't stand behind Israel, if we don't make sure we have good security arrangements with Israel, we're next. It's just the bottom line. And this is what they have said. Mahmoud Ahmadinejad has said that they are going to eradicate Israel. They're going to wipe them off the map. If you want to have peace in the Middle East, you've got to have a willing peace partner first and foremost. You know, security borders and mandatory E-Verify. You know, today in the state of Alabama, they signed in some very strong illegal immigration laws. The last thing I think is so important. It It has been very frustrating for me to sit back and look at us be involved in a nation-building occupation style of warfare. It drains your economic resources. 10 years, 11 years is too long for us to be mired down in places like Iraq or Afghanistan. I gave a speech last week at the Heritage Foundation. I talked about how we've got to develop a national security roadmap. The problem with the United States of America that I've seen in my 6 months is that we do everything in an election cycle sound bites. We come up with policies for every 2 years or 4 years based upon us telling you what we think you want to hear in order to get us reelected. If we don't start looking at 30, 40, 50 years out with our economy, with our national security, with our energy policies and programs, then we're going to lose this great nation. And we will be the first generation that will hand over something less to subsequent generations. It's about visionary leadership. And if there's one thing that I've learned in the past 6 months up in Washington, D.C., we're missing that. We're lacking that. We've got to use it. We've got to do something about paying down our debt. And I really want the people over on the other side of the Senate to help us out. Someone's got to come up with a plan. Don't shoot folks just because they come up with a plan. Come up with something. Because right now, America is standing on a precipice, looking out into a very deep abyss. And one leg is dangling off the edge. The window of opportunity for us to correct the situation we're in is closing. And once it closes, the dream that is America, the thing that our founding fathers left for us, there is no more exceptional, no greater nation than the United States of America. When you think about what we've done in 234, 35 years, but in the twinkling of an eye, we could lose it. So I want you to think about that as you go home. What is America? What does it mean to you? And shall she see greater days? Or are her greatest days behind her? I believe that our greatest days are ahead of us, because that's just the resiliency of who we are. Which goes back to the spirit of those men when that ramp went down on Omaha and Utah Beach. That's what America's about. Let me just give you some facts. We can tax you to death, and it's still not going to make a difference. Because it is not a revenue problem in the United States of America. $2.2 to $2.3 trillion that's what we're bringing in. It's the spending problem in the United States of America. Right now, $3.5, $3.6 trillion of spending. Next year, we're talking about $3.8 trillion of spending. That's what we got to turn around. And a lot of people don't understand. Small business owners don't operate from a corporate business tax rate. They operate as S corporations from a personal income tax rate. If you start raising taxes on people that are making $250,000 above, you're going to see more closed storefronts. Because that 5 or 6% that they're talking about means another America that won't get hired. Means a couple other Americans that will get fired. If you continue on with this burden of this health care law, which we're up to about 1,400 waivers, that means more people that are not going to be hired, more people that are not going to be covered, more people that are going to be put on part-time. We have to set the conditions for economic growth, and it starts with us up there. It is not about combat operations in Iraq and Afghanistan. As I said, what you see right there, per year, is only about 3.5% of our GDP spending that we've done per year in these theaters of operations. That's the number one responsibility we have to have. Could we have done it different? I'm here to tell you, I've been on the ground, absolutely. That's why I'm happy to be on the Armed Services Committee, to make sure we do it right. But we've got to be honest, okay? Do we have a bad situation back in January 2000? Not sure. But, part of leadership is accepting responsibility and accountability. We got to turn this thing around. And no more is it time for blame games. It is about coming up with the right principles that have always worked for this country and get this thing turned around in the United States of America. So thank you for coming out, and I guess they're ready.
Good evening. Good evening, Congressman Webster.
Good evening, Tom.
I'm David Jaffe. I'm from the College of International Communication here at Lynn University. I want to thank you for completing the question cards that you placed inside the box. You've given me homework for the last hour. I've gone through them, tried to organize them into categories, and as you might expect, there were a number of them that addressed the economy. So let's begin with that. This is from Mark in Boca Raton. Do you think there is enough time to save the economy before the next election?
You know, the thing is this. It has to do with ideological principles. I'm going to be very honest with you. In the United States of America right now, I don't think it's no longer about Republican or Democrat. It's about the ideological divide, the chasm that is developing. How do you see government interacting with the individual citizen, with society, and with the private sector? And if we will come to the recognition that we have to set the conditions, the economic and tax policy for the private sector to grow and to thrive, if we will do that, then we will turn this economy around. But if we don't want to do that, then we're going to continue down this path that we're in. You know, when I look at the progressive tax code that we have right now, we need to have tax reform. You know, when 47% of wage-earning American households are not paying federal income taxes, we got a problem. I believe in going to a flat tax. You can really quickly do that. But a lot of people out there believe in a consumption-based tax, a fair tax. Maybe that can be the end state. But with a consumption-based tax or a fair tax, there's a lot of things you have to do. You got to repeal the 16th Amendment. You got to get rid of the IRS. You got to make sure there's no federal level taxation around. Everyone wants to see the tax man go away. But the thing is this: if we don't make sure we do those type of things, then a fair tax or a consumption-based tax, they're talking about 23% on goods and services, can become a value-added tax. And that is what has destroyed Europe. When you have taxation, you put another level of taxation on. So I think, once again, it is about us sitting down and talking about what are the things that the private sector needs to grow. And we've got to, once again, it's about confidence, it's about capital, and it's about certainty. And if we can develop those type of principles, we'll fix this thing before the next election.
You just answered Craig's question as well. He wrote 5 words: flat tax or fair tax. Let me go.
That was that ESPN one.
This is from Tony in Boca Raton. Police, firefighters, and teachers, which are the middle class, have sacrificed for the greater benefit of the top 2%, oil companies, and Wall Street. Please explain how you'll help the middle class.
Well, it's very simple. I just talked about the fact that I think that we can eradicate subsidies and loopholes. Whoever came up with $4.5 subsidies, we need to find them, we need to tar and feather that person. It is about supporting our law enforcement and our firefighters. And let me tell you the other thing about teachers. You're looking at a guy who used to be a teacher at Deerfield Beach for a year. And I gotta tell you, that was such an enjoyable experience. I volunteered to go to Afghanistan. But let me tell you a little story. Back in the late 1970s, we had health, education, and welfare. And then we split out and created the Department of Education. And the Department of Education back in the late 1970s had about 450 to 500 employees. Had an annual budget of about $18 billion. Today, the Department of Education upwards close to about 5,000 employees. I think they have about 3 office buildings in Washington, D.C. They have a budget that's closer now to $70 to $80 billion. But as we grew the bureaucracy of government and education, what happened to the standards of education in that section? Okay. So what I think needs to happen is the resources in education need to get down into the teacher, need to get into the classroom, not in the bureaucracy, not at that bureaucratic level. I think when you look at education in the United States of America, we need to have a change in the paradigm. And that's how we help to increase and grow the quote-unquote the middle class. When you go into our classrooms right now, we're teaching kids how to take a test. We're not teaching kids how to be critical thinkers. We're not teaching kids how they can go out and be productive members of our society. Education in the United States of America has almost become irrelevant, and therefore that affects that middle class that you're talking about. You don't have that vibrant, skilled middle class. So I think the most important thing that we have to do, we got to get back to public-private partnerships. You know, teachers can teach theory. Now go out in the local community and get people that can come in and talk about practical application. And as they talk about practical application with these young people, when they make good grades, give them an internship over the summer. And get them interested, and maybe when they graduate, they will come back and they will work for you. And that's how we build up this class. That's how we develop the next generation in our local communities. And that's where we fail. Education has been pushed down and decentralized and get down to the local level. And that's how we make a vibrant middle class. The other way that we make a vibrant middle class is we set the economic policies, tax policies, so that small businesses can hire people. And corporations and businesses can relocate back into the United States of America, hopefully South Florida, and hire people. And guess what happens? If someone has a great idea, and then they launch off and start their own business. But it comes back to us setting conditions up there in Washington, D.C. So tax policies, economic policies, that's what we have to do. It comes back to one simple thing. Reducing the size and scope of the federal government so that you all can grow down here. From centralized planning to decentralized planning and execution. That's what we have to do.
Now, there have been a couple of questions about Medicare.
Sure.
Brian from Boca Raton writes, how will seniors cover their catastrophic illnesses when they will be at the mercy of insurance companies? Tulip, also from Boca, writes, please detail the way in which you will protect our senior citizens' health care if they are struggling financially.
Well, one of the first things is that there is no change for anyone 55 years or older. The other thing is this. As we see Medicare as it is, this fee for service, in 13 years, the Board of Trustees has already said Medicare goes away. Now, one of the things we have to do combined with this, ladies and gentlemen, doctors are leaving the state of Florida. If we don't institute some type of catastrophic litigation reform, tort reform, we're not going to have doctors here that will take care of our seniors. We already have doctors that are turning back Medicare as it is right now. When you talk about insurance agencies and companies, we allow the insurance companies to run the boat. You know, when you look at the state of Florida, where you have a monopoly of insurance companies where you cannot compete, we've got to break that down. Now, with this plan for Paul Ryan, if you are a lower income senior, you will get more of a defined contribution to make sure that you can cover your medical health care costs. That's a critical thing. But along with that, we've got to make sure that we reform the insurance industry. We've got to make sure that we do something about tort reform. Instead of taxing, health savings accounts for a lot of people, we should be boosting health savings accounts. I'll give you a great example about using me as a personal example. Insurance companies make money off of me because I keep myself healthy. And at the end of the year, when I have not used any of that insurance premium, there should be three options that I get. My premium rolls over. My premium gets refunded back to me, or I can donate that to an American. But the thing is that, what's the incentive for me to live a healthy lifestyle? Because what happens every year is that I have to go right back in, I have to, once again, pay the insurance companies. The insurance industry has to be reformed. That's one of the key things we have to have as part of this plan, as part of us moving forward. And that is about free market competition to get these insurance companies to lower their rates.
Well, this is a hot topic. What are your feelings about Congressman Wiener's action?
I was praying to God. My wife and two daughters are sitting here. For me, that's unacceptable. For me, that's unacceptable. But this is what I was saying about the situation. It's summertime. And in summertime, kids are going to come and they're going to visit Washington, D.C. And they're going to go up in the House gallery, and they're going to be there while we're in session. What do we want our children to see when they look down on the House gallery? And so the thing that I have to say is that, you know, there has to be a standard of integrity and character that we present. But also, you got to ask yourself one simple question. Do the people up that you send as representatives, are they a reflection of you?
Let's stay with the members of Congress for a moment. What has been your reception? This is from Raymond in Delray Beach. What has been your reception with the senior Republican members of Congress?
I think it's been fun. You know, I think this is what's most important. I'm a freshman member of Congress, but that doesn't mean I'm a rookie. I have some life experiences. I've been in some pretty tough situations. You know, when you command 700 people in a combat zone, that seasons you. And I don't think that anyone here, whether the people that voted for me or did not vote for me, you did not send me to Washington, D.C. to be a lemming. You sent me to Washington, D.C. to sit down and read legislation and come up with my own decision. That's why someone can stand up there, and even if the leadership is saying we want all of you to vote for the free provision of the Patriot Act, I can say, not so fast. That's why even if the Speaker of the House comes up with his own resolution, I can do my own assessment analysis, and I can talk to my constituents, and I can say, not so fast. I think that the thing is, I'm not up there to be liked. You know, I have no problems eating my little, you know, TV microwave dinner at 10 o'clock at night. But the most important thing is I think that in 6 months, I've been able to gain a lot of respect, not just from those who it's about respect. At the end of the day, there are 3 things that you have to have. And this is something I always taught my soldiers. You gotta have your honor, you gotta have your integrity, you gotta have your character. And you can't just sell yourself out because you want to be with the in crowd. Now I will tell you, every day that you wake up there in the house is like the surrogated plains of Africa. You got a herd of gazelles, and you got a pack of lions. And sometimes the lions do overtake the gazelle. And I've seen that happen. But you know, I got some pretty big horns, so I tend to fight them all. But the most important thing is, how do you all feel about me? Not how do they feel.
Sander in West Palm Beach wants to be specific, not general. He asked, how do you feel about Speaker Boehner? Specifically, is he the right leader for these critical times? You know,
with that being said, I am a freshman member of Congress. It would be the same as if a young lieutenant came in and you asked him that question to say, okay, how do you feel about the battalion commander? The guy that's been around, been in the Army 20, 22 years, been in combat zones, things that nature. So the thing is this, you know, I'm comfortable enough with Speaker Boehner. There's some instances where we disagree. I mean, you already saw it. But for me to sit here as a guy who has been in politics for a whole 6 months, to make a character's assessment of a guy who's been up there for 20, 21 years, you know, that would be totally out of my lane. But, you know, I'm not going to stay there for 20 years. You guys got my guarantee on that. But I think that he's doing the best that he can do in this very tough situation. Could he do more? Would I like to see him do more? Do I want to continue to encourage him? Absolutely right. But as I said, there's a window of opportunity that everyone needs to come together in the United States of America and fix this thing, or else we're hosed. So that's the message that I would hope that you continue on.
Well, as you might expect, there are a number of questions on the Middle East and the Arab Spring. Denise from Boynton Beach asks, if Israel is attacked, do you think that Congress is aware enough of what's really going on absolutely stand with Israel?
Well, there are several pieces of legislation that are sitting in the House as far as making sure that Jerusalem stays a unified city and the support of the Congress to Israel. So I don't think we have a problem there. But what I am concerned about is the message that we're sending to the Middle East. We're emboldening a very tough and vicious enemy that, you know, go back and do your research on the Muslim Brotherhood. I mean, it goes back to the 1920s, some things they have done. They were the ones responsible for the assassination of Anwar Sadat. And there was one simple thing that people understand in the Middle East, and that's strength. If you don't show strength, if you don't show a vigilance, they're going to take advantage of it. And I say this, having sat down with 45 or 50 Sunni sheiks on countless times. And that's what they're looking for. And they'll lie to you. You will know that they're lying. They will know that you know that they're lying. And they will still try to lie. And that's just how it is. It's what they call the bazaar mentality, B-A-Z-A-A-R. It's about bargaining. We have to show that we are going to be tougher than they are. Because even in Afghanistan, if we don't show our strength, tribal leaders are going to win to the other side. If we continue to give $3 billion to Pakistan, they're going to accept fighter jets from China. They're going to have China build them a naval base. And then the next thing you know, we're going to wake up and we're going to find something horrendous that is happening all across North Africa and the Middle East. We have got to send a clear message that we are going to stand with Israel, that we're not going to accept anything but them coming to the table without these Islamic terrorist organizations. Golda Meir said it very simply. She said if the Palestinians were to lay down their weapons, there would be peace in the Middle East. If Israel were to lay down their weapons, that would be nasty. Don't put Israel in that position.
And when you touched on this, I'd like to read Richard's question. He's from Boca Raton. How strong is the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt? And if Gaddafi is overthrown, who do the Libyan rebels represent?
And that's my point, Richard, is the Muslim Brotherhood is the only organized opposition political organization in Egypt. Muslim Brotherhood is in the United States of America. There's a great book out there you can pick up and read called Muslim Mafia. I would recommend that you do that so that you can understand the means by which they are infiltrating the political systems, the economic systems, the cultural systems, the religious systems here in the United States, education systems here in the United States of America. You know, there are many different front groups that are under the umbrella of the Muslim Brotherhood that are operating in the United States of America. When you look at what's happening in Libya, like I said, once again, can anyone tell me who's the head of the rebel group in Libya? You know, you ever thought about, you know, where are these guys getting these rocket launchers and these weapons? Okay. You know, there's, you know, between the Muslim Brotherhood and Iran, there's a serious issue going on. And don't forget Turkey as well. If you read up on President Erdogan in Turkey, Turkey has moved from the secular nation that Kemal Atatürk instituted with a very strong military. They're moving toward a very radical Islamist standpoint as well. See, what's going to happen in the Middle East is who ends up being the leader of what they want to see as an Islamic caliphate. If you don't understand what that means a borderless Islamic empire that has one single rule. Now, is it going to be a Sunni leader? Is it going to be a Shiite leader? This is one of the problems that we have in America. We don't study. We don't study history. We don't really go in depth to understand the adversaries that we fight against. We try to take them at face value. We try to believe that they're just like us, and we can bring them some democracy and some McDonald's, they'll be okay. There are people that hate you just because you exist. Leon Klinghoffer was not pushed off the Achilles laurel because of policies in the Middle East. He was killed just because he was an American. He was Jewish. Better remember.
Dennis from Boca Raton asks, the imam of the mosque in Margate was arrested for terrorist ties along with others and is being held without bail. Why in the world is our government allowing this mosque in Margate to be built? Didn't we learn from 9/11?
Alleged. He hasn't been convicted yet, but I will tell you this. We have to be concerned about what's happening within our communities. You got to be vigilant. I mean, you have a similar situation happening in Pompano Beach, where there is a mosque that Saudi Arabia is financing, that I think is supposed to be like 20,000 square feet or even larger. And the Muslim community in Pompano Beach only has 25 members that attend the current structure that is there right now. So to me, it's got growth industry or what? You know, I believe in freedom of religion. Not a problem. But there's a very thin line when all of a sudden a religious belief can become a seditious belief if that belief threatens the essence of who you are. You got to study and understand what Sharia law is, what it means. Because we can't be like in England, where you have two dual legal systems. You can't have English common law and Sharia law, because they're diametrically opposed. The laws that we believe here in the United States of America about the individual, their rights and freedoms, we believe in the Constitution. There's a totally different belief that it's the antithesis of who we are in this country. You got to recognize that, and you have to identify it, because it is a threat. So there's a thin line between this thing called freedom of religion, and they're very good at using that. That is why Major Nadal Hassan was able to be transferred from Walter Reed Army Medical Center to Fort Hood, Texas, when we knew exactly what he was doing, but under his religious rights. No one said a thing. So 43 people were shot, 13 were killed. You better be able to figure out that thin line, or else you'll be exploited.
Another question from the Middle East. Beth from Boca Raton. I heard today that we are now involved militarily in Yemen. There was no direct threat to the U.S. Why are we there? And did President Obama consult anyone in Congress regarding it?
No, we were not consulted. Maybe he got together with the chairman of the Armed Services Committee or the Speaker of the House, or the Senate Majority Leader, but we were not consulted. You know, look, I do understand drone attacks. Hall.AVI, who is the head of Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, we believe that he is in Yemen. And so I can understand drone attacks. But, you know, once again, how many people in here served in Vietnam? Okay. There are two words that we learned in Vietnam that make military guys skin crawl. Mission creep. You've seen that in Libya, where at first we were told we were going in to protect innocent civilians. It's very hard to protect innocent civilians from 30,000 feet, trust me. And the next thing we were told that we were going to destroy Muammar Gaddafi's military force. The next thing we're told we're there to remove Muammar Gaddafi. NATO has already talked about 90 days more of operations and even introducing ground force. Now all of a sudden we're waking up and we're hearing about increasing covert operations in Yemen. Remember what I talked about, War Powers Act? You gotta come to us, you gotta talk to us, you gotta tell us what's going on. You can't violate that. Founding Fathers put in place this thing called separation of powers, checks and balances. That's statutory law. So we have to be very careful. So go back home tonight, read up on the War Powers Act, and understand the very specific criteria that is involved in allowing the President of the United States of America to commit to even limit combat operations. Yemen doesn't fit that. Libya definitely did not fit that. Iraq really didn't fit that. Afghanistan did fit that. So we have got to start holding our feet to the fire as far as legal system of the War Powers Act and the prosecution of warfare.
Let's move east a little bit farther. It appears we have a statement, a report from Roger in Highland Beach. It appears that the U.S. is no longer monitoring stateside radiation from the Japanese nuclear disaster. This tends to lead to all sorts of speculation. Is there anything you can do to ensure that the public is accurately informed on radiation levels, dangers, and risks?
What I can do is this. I will, my staff will take that. When we get back up there, I'll sit down with the Committee on Energy and Commerce, and we'll make sure we look at that.
Doug from Boca writes, would you accept the nomination for president in 2000?
That's very humble. I've been in politics for 6 months. Okay, let's be very honest. Okay, a lot of folks worked hard, as I've said so many times, to get me to just this position right now. You've got to allow me to prove to you all and to this nation that I can be a capable legislator, I can be an American statesman, and I can win a re-election as a congressional representative. That it was not a fluke. Now, as I continue to say, if it is God's will that I move on to a higher height, then I will. 4 years ago, you're looking at a guy who was sitting in the deserts of Kandahar, Afghanistan. 4 years ago. And next week, I'll be on a town hall meeting on CBS. You know, before I was even sworn in, I was on Meet the Press. There are a lot of incredible things that have happened for me, but don't rush me into something until I'm really ready. No, I'm serious. Don't rush me. I don't want to be a cult of personality. I don't want to be an American Idol type of candidate. I want people to believe that if he goes to the next level, I can sleep well at night because that guy will be the one that will answer that phone call at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Well, then I can guess the answer to Susan's question. Would you accept the vice presidential candidacy? I'll just move right along here. Robin in Deerfield.
They're not going to pick me. Don't worry.
Robin in Deerfield asks, who would you like to see as the Republican candidate?
See, you guys are building up to that. And well, let me say, I don't know. You know, if you go back and look at when Bill Clinton was elected, everybody's saying there was nobody out there. All of a sudden, he comes out of nowhere. How many people knew who Jimmy Carter was? How many people knew who Barack Obama was? No, what I'm just saying is that you never know who's going to be ended up as the front runner. By September or October, you will see who ends up, pulling the head. But I will tell you this. In a presidential election cycle is different from a midterm election cycle. A presidential election cycle is starting, a midterm election cycle, people understand the legislative process. They understand issues. They understand what's at stake. A little bit more savvy elector goes into a midterm election cycle. A presidential election cycle starts to look a lot like American Idol. It really is. And there are 2 phases to a presidential election cycle. There's an image phase and there's a message phase. You got to win an image phase. A presidential candidate is a product. And a lot of times people look at the packaging of that product before they pull it off the shelf and they're willing to open it to see whether or not the product works. So the thing is so important, and I've said this many times before. In the Republican Party, they cannot continue to believe in a leadership by entitlement mentality. You know, who was second last time, you'll be first to go this time. You really have to understand the rules of the road and how they've changed in national level politics. You have to have someone that has a charismatic and personal appeal that can bring people and draw them to continue to talk about the issues and talk about your message. So I think that's what we have to look at as we go forward in the 2012.
John from Deerfield writes, do you think there are enough members of Congress who think like you do to really make a difference, or is this just an academic exercise?
Well, I was saying my wife, obviously, she don't want too many people to think like me. But, once again, the people that you send up there are a reflection of you. This is a republic. No one person is going to destroy the United States of America, folks. I mean, come on. Let's be serious. The United States of America is a resilient country. It's been around, like I said, 234 short years. Think about what we've achieved. We've achieved that because of the people, exceptional people in the United States of America. So the thing is this. Send people to Washington, D.C. that are a reflection of you. Send people to Washington, D.C. They're going to study. They're going to present themselves before you. And you may not like the things that I say. You may not like all the things you say. But one thing you will never be able to debate about, and I'm willing to stand in front of anybody and talk about issues. And that's what you have to have to go to Washington, D.C. You have to have someone that has been willing to lay their life down for this country so that when they stand up and they take the oath means something. That's what you have to have.
This question switches gears. Andrew asks, will you sponsor or support legislation to end cruelty to animals on factory farms?
Okay, cruelty to animals and what?
On factory farms.
I mean, what do you mean? Like, I don't know, the pig farms or what? I mean, you gotta, help me out and give me a little bit. I don't want to see anybody treating an animal bad. Okay? I gotta tell you, when I was in Korea, they do me dog over there. I mean, it hurt my heart when you went past a market and you saw what they did with the dogs. I mean, they put them behind a truck or whatever, and kind of drag